My name is Coleman Yoakum. I, along with several friends, started an organization a couple years ago called Micah 6 Community. We're in Pontiac, Michigan, which is a northwest suburb. But before that all started, we actually kind of got our start back in Searcy, Arkansas, while we were students at Harding University. I got roped into doing jail ministry with a friend of mine, which is not in my nature. I have a deep-rooted fear that I will actually go to jail for something that I didn't do. I have dreams about it. It's one of my irrational fears, along with shark attacks. So he said, let's go do some jail ministry together. I said, okay. We went, and it was a lot cooler than I expected. I had a lot of, preconceived ideas and things like this, but once I got there, started talking to guys and meeting guys, and they were cool. And they were guys who had families and guys who, I grew up not far from Harding, and so they were folks who were coming from a lot of same neighborhoods that I had grown up in and knew folks in, things like that. Sort of through conversation, I started finding out that a lot of these guys were from a neighborhood there in Searcy, about a mile from campus. My best friend Dylan, who was also doing jail ministry with me at the time, we said, what if we just grabbed a soccer ball, walk down into that neighborhood and see if we can meet some of their kids and start playing soccer and seeing if we can make a difference in that neighborhood. Weird idea. I don't know. Never heard of anybody do anything like that. We're like, well, let's try it. So we grabbed a soccer ball. We walked. We started playing in this little grassy area, and then here comes a kid. And then here comes another kid, and here comes another kid. And eventually, by the end of the afternoon, we had 10 kids playing soccer with us, and we said, that was interesting. Let's try it again. So we did it the next week, and we did it the next week. And as we did this more often, all the kids would come out. Eventually, moms would say, where do my kids go every Wednesday at 5 o'clock? They came, and they got to know us. There were a lot of kids who were in that neighborhood who were toddlers, but they were like everyone else in that neighborhood. They were tenacious. And they would get out there, and they would try and play, and they would get hit by a ball, and they would cry, and they would run away, and then they would come back 5 minutes later and do it again. So we said, we need some girls, which was a problem because we didn't know a whole lot of them at the time. So we made some friends, and we said, hey, can you come? We do this thing on Wednesday. Can you come and hang out with the younger kids? And these girls said, sure. And so they came and did that. And then the girls made it their own thing, and they're like, let's start babysitting nights. Let's start nights where we meet at somebody's apartment, we babysit kids, because a lot of these single moms never get a break from their toddlers. So they started meeting at apartments and watching kids, and moms would go shopping, or sometimes they would just sit in their house in the quiet. And that was great. And then, things started growing. We brought more people in, came up with more stuff to do. Then we started, we were coming up on Easter, and we said, let's do something cool for Easter. What can we do? We're all broke college kids. Well, at the time, we had some friends who had this sort of competition going amongst them to see who could get away the longest with raising barnyard animals in their dorm rooms. So we knew dudes who had chickens. We knew dudes who had ducks. We knew a guy who had some rabbits. There was some guy who was like, I have a ferret. And we're like, no, you're weird. And then, there was a church in town that said it was too much to plan an Easter egg hunt on Sunday. So instead, why don't we do it on Saturday after their Easter egg hunt? They threw away all of their eggs. We dumpster dove for their eggs. We took them, we refilled them, and we had a big Easter event in that neighborhood with those kids. And it just kind of grew into this thing, and it was awesome, and it was a lot of fun. And we sort of hit this moment where, Harding is a great place because so many people, I'm sure it's like Pepperdine, where so many students are from out of state. And they get there, and they jump in, and they make great relationships, and they get plugged into really cool ministries. And then graduation comes, and everybody moves home or to Nashville. So we said, we got together and we said, guys, let's stick together. We're really good at this. We really like it. Things kind of grew from there. Several of us, we're still doing jail ministry, knowing guys who were getting out of jail who didn't have a place to live. So I took it upon myself to get a single room in the dorm and let guys who had just got out of jail live with me in the dorm. I didn't tell anybody about that, but now you know. So things like this, and we said this is weird and it's different, but I think it's a lot like what the church should look like. And I don't think church was ever meant to be not fun. I mean, there are guys who are getting beat up and who are getting killed in Acts, and they are walking down the street rejoicing. And I think a lot of that's because they get to do ministry with their friends, and they get to see the way that it's really changing the lives around them and through that changing the world. So we said, let's keep doing this. And so we all settled on moving to a northwest suburb just north of Detroit called Pontiac. We looked for a neighborhood with high crime, high foreclosure, high unemployment. I told my mom, she cried. So this is the area that we settled in, and we through reading Acts together, we said, man, there's that verse in Acts 2 that says, and the church had everything in common. I think we read that verse sometimes, and I think the cheapest thing that we can do to that verse is make that verse about money. I think that they were sharing so much more than money. So we said, we're going to start a ministry, and we want to do like this kind of work in a neighborhood. We need to share a neighborhood. We have a lot of ministries in my town that are run by folks who say, I'm called to work with homeless people, but I'm going to live in a wealthy suburb somewhere else and drive in. The biggest homeless shelter in my town is run by a guy who lives in a wealthy suburb and drives a Hummer. Solidarity with the poor is something that we were really wanting to have, and sharing a neighborhood was going to be a big part of that. So we said that's going to be important to us. We bought a house, we moved in, we started getting to know folks in the neighborhood, and then we said that we have skills that we can share that will make this neighborhood better. Access to food in my neighborhood is hard to come by. The nearest grocery store is 1.5 miles away. 80% of my neighbors don't have access to regular transportation. And so we said we need to use our gardening skills, the skills that we have as people who can grow things, because I'm from Arkansas. What do you get? And we said, let's start growing gardens. And so we bought vacant land that was around our house and started growing gardens. And then people can come over, and then we grow things together, and because we're figuring out this Acts 2 thing is we share what we grow. And then through that, we're sharing time with our neighbors. We started figuring out that there's a lot of neighbors in our neighborhood who don't have basic things that we have. We had friends who were squatting in houses. And so, we met this guy on the street, and he said, hey, can I, come hang out at your house? And we were hanging out, and I said, hey, man, if you ever need to take a shower. And he said, oh, wow, me and my girlfriend are squatting in a vacant house. Doesn't have any utilities. And we said, sure, come on over, take a shower, make food. This sort of led to this open door policy that we have at Micah 6, where every morning the door opens at 9 o'clock, and then it doesn't really close until 11 at night or until the last person leaves. And sometimes that's later than 11. So we have this thing where now people are just in and out of our house all the time, which means that we're also sharing our time with our neighbors, where we're getting to know them, we're hearing about their lives, we're hearing their stories, and we are really just sort of diving in. So in sharing stuff with our neighbors, weird conversations happen at my house a lot. And, once you have enough weird conversations, they're not weird anymore. But one day we were sitting there, and Tanya had come in. She had made a bowl of soup, and she sat down. And Sheik, who's one of our neighborhood homeless alcoholics, looks at me and he says, Cole, man, she just made food. You guys don't know, this is a great impression. You just made food at your house. And she sat down and she's going to eat it right in front of you. I said, yeah. He said, and you're just cool with that? I said, yeah, it's fine. Anybody can do that. He goes, anybody can make food? I can make food? I said, you can make food. And he goes, man. And he walks out the door. This is a weird interaction, but this happens a lot. So we're sitting there, we're hanging out. Tanya's there. Cool Breeze, who's one of our other neighbors, who's 73, 74. He's mentally challenged. His guardian was his sister, who was 78 and passed away. And so Cool Breeze is out on the street by himself. Cool Breeze is hanging out at our house. He makes coffee every day. He announces his presence by just walking in the door and going, Cool Breeze. We say, hey, Cool Breeze, how's it going? He goes, pretty good. And he goes and he makes coffee. Anyway, so we're sitting there and we're talking in our living room, and we hear down the street, I'm going to make food. And we look out the door, and Sheik is yelling at everyone on the street, Cole said I could make food at his house. Cole at the end of the street. And we were like, what in the world? Sheik had gone to the gas station at the end of the street and bought a stack of ramen this tall and was coming back. And Sheik has a stash of ramen at my house that he cooks because he can cook at my house. And that's different to him. He'd been eating cold ramen for years because he didn't have a place to cook. Through the gardens, we do, sort of a neighborhood, take what you can. Nancy, who's one of our biggest volunteers, lives across the street, and she really grabbed onto this idea and said, can I take food and give it to the people in my apartment building? And we said, yes, absolutely. So our hospitality and sort of the sharing idea has now become contagious in my community, where people are taking things that they helped grow and that they are sharing with other people. And so then we go to a community barbecue where we meet some people who just moved into the neighborhood, and they say, hi, are you Coleman? I say, yeah. And they say, oh, I've had green beans from your garden. I've had cucumbers. I've had whatever. And so now, the love of our garden is reaching people before we ever get to meet them, which is a really cool thing that we did not expect in my neighborhood. In our neighborhood, we share challenges. We have neighbors who are consistently in addiction and falling back and forth in and out of addiction. We have neighbors who are struggling to reconnect with their families after years of being alienated because of drugs. We share the challenges of having a job. We have David is one of our neighbors, and he came to me one day and he says, Coleman, I got a job. And at Micah 6, we love jobs. We're like, yes, great, awesome. What are you doing? He says, I'm working at McDonald's. I'm like, okay, where? He says, Dixie Highway, which is 5 miles away. I'm like, what in the world? How did you even get there to get a job application? Whatever. He says, I'm going to need help getting to work. Can you give me a ride? This is one of those moments where, this is another thing that we share is, yes, that is a hurdle for you, and I will share that with you by taking you to work every day. When do you have to be there? I have to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. I will not be sharing joy with you at 5 o'clock in the morning. I will take you there. We will do it. It will be great. I will not like it. And so this is sort of the things that we share together in my neighborhood, and finally we share hard things. We share those hard things, like when Yesenia, who's 17 with 2 kids, finds out she has breast cancer. We work through that with them and with their family, and we're there because that hurts us. But then we also share celebrations. Robert is coming up on 1 year of sobriety. And that has been a group effort between rides, between encouragement, between calls at 1 o'clock in the morning, between us being the numbers that he calls all the time when he needs help. Therefore, whenever he sits on his phone, we get the pocket dial at 3 a.m. We share in that. We share, even today was a great moment because we were all sitting at dinner and our phones sort of all simultaneously go off together, and we looked at each other, and it was a notification on all of our phones because we had all been tagged. My whole team had been tagged in a post from one of our homeless people, Brandy, that her housing voucher had gone through. So we are all celebrating with Brandy today because she got a house, and that's exciting to us. And so Acts 2 is changing my neighborhood. And an Acts 2 attitude is changing my neighborhood in a lot of the same way that it was supposed to change the world. Because that verse is about a lot more than money. Thank you guys so much.